In the ancient land of Israel, where prophecies have woven their mystic tapestry for millennia, a series of 3 harrowing events has just unfolded, sending tremors through the hearts of those who dare to listen. These prophetic occurrences, like pages ripped from a foreboding script, have taken root in the very soil that holds the weight of history. In this land of miracles and revelations, a tale unfolds that defies the boundaries of imagination. With each passing moment, the whispers of ancient seers grow louder, and the boundaries between the ethereal and the tangible blur into a chilling reality. Chapter: Red Heifer. Does the appearance of 5 red heifers in Israel indicate the imminent construction of the Third Temple or the end of times? The 5 cows, which were raised in the United States by a Christian rancher, arrived in Israel on Thursday. On Thursday, 5 rabbi-approved red heifers arrived at Ben Gurion Airport from Texas for a ceremonial greeting. Their arrival sparked a storm of debate as to the prophetic implications of their presence in Israel and whether or not we are barreling toward a Third Temple period or the last days. The fact that the cows have been examined by rabbis and proven to be red and free of any defects indicates that they are ritually pure and eligible for sacrifice by the requirements of the law of Moses. According to the book of Numbers, for a person who adheres to the laws of Mosaic to achieve a state of ceremonial purity, they are obliged to use the ashes of a red heifer. This is a requirement of the law that the Lord has commanded. Tell the Israelites to bring you a red heifer that is without defect or blemish and that has never been under a yoke. Numbers 19:2. The farmers in Texas were well aware of the rules, therefore they refrained from tagging the cow's ears to preserve their unmarred appearance. Because these heifers are already in Israel, sacrifices and other temple services might be resumed as soon as the temple is renovated, or as some people believe, if it falls from the sky. Many Jews interpret this as a sign that their redemption is now within reach. Jews are taught to believe that to be cleansed, they need the ashes of a red heifer. Christians believe that the only sacrifice that is necessary for redemption was offered by Jesus Christ on their behalf. Boneh Israel, a Christian group, was the one that discovered the cattle, and in conjunction with the Temple Institute, was the one that was responsible for transporting them to Israel. At the beginning of this year, rabbis from the Temple Institute traveled to Texas to examine the cows there. Christians and Jews both believe that the completion of the Third Temple heralds the end of the world, or the beginning of the Messianic era. However, the New Testament also links the Third Temple to the man of perdition, also known as the Antichrist, who will appear at the end of time and assist in the construction of the temple. The cows were placed in quarantine for 10 days as soon as they arrived in Israel. Does the arrival of the heifers in Israel mark the beginning of the end times, which Christians believe will be marked by the appearance of the Messiah or the second coming of Jesus? Does this indicate that we have started down the path that leads directly to the end times and the tribulation? Verses 1 to 10 of Numbers 19 are titled, "The Water of Cleansing." The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and told them, "This is a necessity of the law that I have commanded. Tell the Israelites to bring you a red heifer that is free of any flaws or defects and that has never been yoked. Give it to Eleazar, the priest. It is to be murdered in his presence outside the camp after it has been transported there. Then Eleazar, the priest, is to take some of the animal's blood on his finger and sprinkle it 7 times in the direction of the entrance of the tent of assembly. The hide, flesh, blood, and intestines of the heifer are going to be burned in front of him while he watches. The hyssop, cedar wood, and scarlet wool are to be taken by the priest and then thrown into the heifer that is currently on fire. After that, the priest must cleanse himself by immersing himself in water and washing his clothing. After that, he is allowed to come back into the camp, but he will remain ritually unclean until the evening. The person who burns it must likewise bathe in water and wash his clothes, else he too would be unclean until sunset. The ashes of the heifer are to be gathered by a clean man, and then they are to be placed at a location that is ceremonially clean, that is located outside of the camp. The Israelite community is responsible for storing them so that they might be used in the water of cleansing. This water is used for purification from sin. The one who is responsible for collecting the ashes of the heifer is required to also wash his garments, and both he and his clothing will remain unclean until sunset. This will be a binding regulation for both the Israelites and the foreigners who are living among them from this point forward. Chapter: The Third Temple, Rebuilding. Is work progressing today on rebuilding the temple? There is considerable worldwide resistance to any Israeli claims to Jerusalem, let alone the Temple Mount. Israeli law makes it illegal for Jews to pray there, and local Muslims, led by the Women in Black, keep a constant vigil to deter Jewish tourists. Also, according to the religious leaders of Islam, the temple was never there. However, recent developments have aided the temple movement's efforts and made it conceivable to restore the temple in our day. Researchers discovered a Jewish ritual cleansing site decades ago in response to the charge that a Jewish temple had never been on the location of the current Al-Aqsa mosque, which Muslims believe was built by Abraham. In a study outlining his excavations of the mosque's ruins after it was destroyed by an earthquake in 1927, British archaeologist Robert Hamilton offered evidence of this. Underneath the floor of the mosque, he found a Jewish miqveh, ritual pool used for cleaning. During the time of the Second Temple, the Jews would utilize it as a place of purification before visiting the Temple Mount. To avoid offending Muslim authorities, the British mandatory hid these findings, which confirmed that the ancient temple stood where the modern-day Temple Mount does today. The Sanhedrin has made preparations for temple services to begin as soon as possible. Planting the forest described in the Bible to supply the Third Temple's agricultural needs is just one of the many projects the group has been working on. When people think of sacrifices, they think of animals and blood, Rabbi Hillel Weiss remarked on the Sanhedrin's behalf. But most were from plants grown around Israel. The temple served as a link between humanity and the supernatural. Sanhedrin member and Rabbi Richman has been spearheading efforts to return the red heifer to Israel. As specified in Numbers 19, the ashes of the red heifer must be mingled with water to purify Jews in preparation for temple service. Between the time of the First and Second Temples, a period of about 1,000 years, only 9 red heifers were ever utilized to make the waters used to purify Jews. It is predicted that the Jewish Messiah will use the 10th one. Richman and other rabbis of the Temple Institute are offering halachic supervision and counseling alongside an Israeli cattleman who is an expert in the science of animal husbandry. He uses a technique that includes inserting frozen embryos of North American Red Angus cattle into native Israeli herds. The red heifer ritual requires a heifer that was born in Israel and has never been yoked. The research was completed after many years of study at the Temple Institute, where ancient religious writings were analyzed using modern scientific methods. The Sanhedrin and the Temple movement hold reenactments of temple ceremonies as a means of training Kohanim, members of the priestly caste. This instruction includes familiarization with the newly constructed altar of burnt offerings and practices with the ritual equipment designed for the Third Temple. This altar is one of a kind because it was made to be removed and swiftly reconstructed in its correct permanent location on Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount, where the original altar once stood. It will be reconstructed in its original location on the Temple Mount so that sacrifices can be performed there once more. Orthodox Jews who are committed to the cause believe that rebuilding the temple is the only way to address the problems facing the Jewish people and the world today. Despite ongoing preparations for the reconstruction of the temple, most members of the temple movement acknowledge the necessity for political action to alter the current situation of Muslim rule of the Mount and allow for Jewish access, a possible occurrence at this very moment. When asked about the site, Israel's highest court responded, "The reality on the Temple Mount is by no means simple," quoting from its verdict opinion on the issue of the works on the Temple Mount. "This is an extremely delicate and complex issue. We own the Temple Mount. Therefore, we can't rely on the courts. We need to take political action instead." According to Daniel's prophecy of the 70th week, a future political leader, the Antichrist of Revelation 13, will make a false covenant with Jewish officials that will result in the building of the Third Temple. It is exciting to see the foundations being laid in the land of Israel for the Third Temple as we anticipate the return of our Messiah. Chapter: Gathering of Exiles. The Hebrew term galut can mean either exile or exiles, depending on the context. For example, in the 37th year of Joachim's exile, Jeremiah 29:14, Ezekiel 11:17, Isaiah 56:8, and Psalm 106:47 all use the verb kibez to depict God's ingathering of Israel's dispersion, but the phrase kibbutz galiot does not appear until rabbinic literature. Yet throughout the Bible, including in the prophecies of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, hope for the return of the dispersed people is often affirmed. This idea is introduced in Deuteronomy 30, 3-5. After going into great detail about the destruction and exile, the Lord makes a vow to return and gather the people from all the nations where He scattered them. The Lord your God will locate you wherever you may be and return you to the land of your forefathers. That's the basic idea of the ingathering of the exiles, although the particulars have evolved and changed over time. It is said in verse 13 of chapter 27 that a great shofar shall be blown, and they shall come that are lost in the land of Assyria, and that they are dispersed in the land of Egypt. Although the exile of the northern kingdom is the primary topic of the first section of Isaiah, there had already been a widespread dispersion in Egypt at the time Isaiah was writing. A return of the children of Israel from the land of the north and all the countries whither he had driven them was foretold by Jeremiah, who also foretold the exile of Judah. Jeremiah prophesied again during Jehoiakim's partial exile in 597 BCE, "I will turn your captivity and gather you from all the nations and from all the places whither I have driven you, and I will get you back where you belong." Similarly, Ezekiel prophesies in 20:34 and 41, "I will bring you out from the peoples and will gather you out of the countries wherein you are scattered." But the 37th chapter occurs after the complete exile of Judah, and Ezekiel then speaks of the ingathering of the exiles of the two kingdoms. In the final chapter of Isaiah, the ingathering is expanded to include Tarshish, Pul, Lud, Tubal, and Javan, which reflects the broad dispersion of the Jews. The Sephardi rite adds to our land, "And blessed art thou, O Lord, who gatherest the dispersed of thy people Israel. Gather all the tribes of Jacob together," Ben Sira states in chapter 36, verse 11. This theme is also present in the New Moon Prayer and the holiday Musaf Amida. That's it for today's video. We'll be back soon with more. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, and thanks for watching.